Welcome, everyone, to the Olive Glen annual meeting. This is a celebration of God's healing presence, active here at Olive Glen, active here with each one of us and in the entire world. I'm Joan Batellis, currently serving as board president at Olive Glen. When I was given the privilege of welcoming you today, it came with a question. How has the board been praying, working metaphysically this past year? Well, the short answer is we've endeavored to truly listen to God for direction. For a bit more, let's turn to our pastor, the Bible and the Christian Science textbook. First, the Holy Bible. Exodus. Behold, I send an angel before thee to keep thee in the way and to bring thee into the place which I have prepared. Psalms. Then stood up Phinehas and executed judgment, and so the plague was stayed, and that was counted unto him for righteousness unto all generations forevermore. He that dwelleth in the secret place of the Most High shall abide under the shadow of the Almighty. Surely he shall deliver thee from the snare of the fowler and from the noisome pestilence. He shall cover thee with his feathers, and under his wings shalt thou trust. Because thou hast made the Lord, which is my refuge, even the Most High, thy habitation, there shall no evil befall thee, neither shall any plague come nigh thy dwelling. For he shall give his angels charge over thee to keep thee in all thy ways. And from Science and Health with Key to the Scriptures by Mary Baker Eddy. Angels, God's thoughts passing to man, counteracting all evil, sensuality, and mortality. The Old Testament assigns to the angels, God's divine messages, different offices. Michael's characteristic is spiritual strength. He leads the hosts of heaven against the power of sin, Satan, and fights the holy wars. Gabriel has the more quiet task of imparting a sense of the ever-presence of ministering love. These angels deliver us from the depths. Truth and love come nearer in the hour of woe, when strong faith or spiritual strength wrestles and prevails through the understanding of God. The Gabriel of his presence has no contests. To infinite, ever-present love, all is love. And there is no error, no sin, sickness, nor death. Against love, the dragon warreth not long, for he is killed by the divine principle. Truth and love prevail against the dragon, because the dragon cannot war with them. Thus endeth the conflict between the flesh and spirit. Every agony of mortal error helps error to destroy error, and so aids the apprehension of immortal truth. This is the new birth going on hourly, by which men entertain angels, the true ideas of God, the spiritual sense of being. Let's unite in a few moments of silent prayer. And when we're finished, you'll see the first verse of hymn 11 on your screen. We'll read this verse together. First, let's join in silent prayer. Now let's read together the first verse of hymn 11 from the Christian Science hymnal. Angels at the Savior's birth woke with music all the earth. Shepherds in the eastern sky saw a pale star passing by, guiding them at break of day, where the babe in meekness lay, born the gracious news to tell, God with us, Emmanuel. Your support of Olive Glen is so effective. Thank you to each Christian Science nurse, practitioner, each staff member, volunteer, and donor. You are so cherished for your contribution to the healing activity here at Olive Glen. Today, we are delighted to have Christian Science practitioner Jan Holden from Redwood Shores, California, as our speaker. The title of Jan's talk is Go Through the Gates. Before Jan is introduced, we want to share some highlights of progress this past year. First, we'll hear from Al Farnham, our Chief Financial Officer.
Good morning. My name is Al Farnham, and I'm a 10-year veteran of the board of Olive Glen, and I'm kind of their finance guy. I'm going to take a few minutes this morning to introduce you to what our financial situation is. It won't be in much detail, but it will be kind of an overview. In terms of income, our sources are like those of most nonprofit charitable organizations that deal in home care. And about 75% of our revenue comes from residents, from the services that they receive. That's what they pay for. The other 25% comes from charitable contributions, from grants, from people like yourselves that provide revenue on an ongoing contributory basis. And there will be several other items, but generally it's a 75-25 ratio, and that's pretty consistent from year to year. In terms of expense items, coincidentally, it's kind of the same thing. About 75% of our expense goes for salaries and benefits of employees to provide the services to our residents. Interestingly enough, insurance is our second largest expense at 9%. The rest of the funds go for food, for utilities, for maintenance, and those type of things. Now, in terms of funds, Olive Glen has a history of never turning anyone away, regardless of their ability to pay. We do work with several benevolent organizations. One, of course, is the National Fund, which you've probably heard about. We have several other philanthropic organizations that provide funds in need when we have that opportunity to assist some of our residents. You'll hear later on in the program about our long-term plans, where we have some proposed remodeling and extension of some of the buildings to make it more livable for our residents. At the present time, we have several situations that are in need of upgrades and so forth, and we would ask you if you would continue to think about us in your giving plans. Well, that's about it, and we want to thank you for all of your continued financial and prayerful support as we continue to grow. If you have any questions relative to finances and Olive Glen, please feel free to contact through our website or through the phone numbers, and we'll be happy to get back to you with the information.
My name is Kate Chapman, and I'm the Director of Christian Science Nursing. The Mother Church annual meeting theme this year is Grace to Go Forward. It's been inspiring to watch patients, residents, and staff express such grace through these unusual times of pandemic. Through these unusual times, we have made it a priority to see and live in the kingdom of heaven each day. Our mission at Olive Glen is to heal, regenerate, and save through Christ-like, compassionate Christian Science nursing and residential care. Olive Glen isn't just a Christian Science nursing facility, but it's a home and a family to us all. Those that come to Olive Glen can feel this healing atmosphere and always comment on how peaceful and calm they feel while they're here. This includes vendors and delivery personnel. Just recently, I was asked by a pharmacist that was visiting Olive Glen, "What is this place and what do you do here?" She said she had never been to a facility like this one before, and that it felt so good while she was here that she didn't want to leave, which she said was not her normal experience when visiting other facilities. She commented on how at other care facilities, COVID was running rapid. I was able to share with her that at Olive Glen, we have not had one single case of COVID with those that reside here. "Not one?" she responded with surprise. "Not one," I replied. And although we have been mandated to wear masks in the care facility setting, this has not interfered at all with the healing atmosphere. Our education program has been going strong through these unusual times of pandemic. Lisa Vonnegut, our Director of Christian Science Nurses Training, has continued to have classes through Zoom, and Judith Owino has been working closely, mentoring the students as they come out of the classroom. We have been blessed to have 3 new student Christian Science nurses start at Olive Glen in our education program this past year. I would love to introduce you to them. Eve Owino, Arturo Santana, and Sharon Oma. And we also have 2 newly journalisted Christian Science nurses, Matthew Oyo and Kirsten Agnew. And that brings me to an exciting announcement. We are getting ready to launch Olive Glen's Visiting Christian Science Nurse Service. Emily Matson will be managing this service. Emily completed her Christian Science Nurses training here at Olive Glen in 2016, and in the years since, she has primarily worked in private duty and visiting Christian Science nurse work. Emily also worked at various camps and at Principia College as a Christian Science nurse, and says she is looking forward to returning home to Olive Glen to bring access to visiting Christian Science nursing to the broader Sacramento area. Our Visiting Christian Science Nurse service provides practical care and comfort in your own home. Services include, but are not limited to, assessing care, safety and nourishment needs, assisting with light care and bathing, cleansing and covering wounds, loading and instructing the use of mobility aids, and planning and prepping meals. There will be more information on this coming soon. Now, I would love to introduce you to Whitney Wolf, our Activities Director.
Divine love always has met and always will meet every human need. I'm Whitney Wolf, and I am the Activities Director at Olive Glen. When I think about my position as Activities Director, I think about how harmonious this position came about. As a Christian Science nurse, I saw the need for the residents to have more than just an outing. They needed a sense of normalcy, a sense of home, family, fun, both as a group and as individuals, especially during the pandemic. I approached the directors with my ideas, and they saw not only that it would bring satisfaction and a sense of joy to the residents, but that I was the perfect match for the job. Now I spend 3/4 of my time with activities. I love Olive Glen, and I love how I get to serve the residents by bringing this expanded sense of community, family, and experience. There's not one day that I am not grateful for being here and having this opportunity. Being a skilled Christian Science nurse adds to the activities that I'm capable of making happen for everyone. I look at the needs of Olive Glen as a whole, and I also look at the needs of every single individual here. As a whole, there are 3 areas that I focus on: metaphysical activities, community activities, and group outings. For individual needs, I'm constantly checking in with everyone one-on-one and making the time to have conversations. Metaphysical activities. This year, because of the pandemic, we are being conservative with the activities outside of Olive Glen. Sunday and Wednesday, Christian Science Mother Church services, Christian Science branch services, and Christian Science lectures are all attended online. As a group, we have a Christian Science Bible lesson discussion every week where the residents take turns reading and discussing each section. On Wednesdays, we conduct our own Christian Science testimony meeting, allowing residents to acknowledge their own healings. In addition, we have a weekly study group where we pick a topic and discuss how to pray about it, finding and reading related articles from our periodicals and researching keywords and phrases in the Christian Science Concord. Creating community. Sometimes people at Olive Glen are here for an extended period of time and are away from their families. One way divine love meets every human need is by providing ideas to create a genuine sense of community. It's important for us at Olive Glen to bring all of the people together that make Olive Glen possible, including the nursing staff, the residents, and the support staff. As a whole, I initiated a program called Spotlight, where we feature one resident and one staff member for an entire month. Each department receives a folder of questions that prompt staff members and residents to write down things that they love about the person, including great qualities, things they do, and extra talents that they express. Then I take these ideas and create a colorful poster board with a photo of the person and all the great things that everyone has said about them, and I display it in the hallways. It has brought joy, appreciation, love, and many tears of gratitude. We make it a point to celebrate events. Just recently, we had a few picnics, outdoor parties for staff members. We even had a shaved ice truck drive in and serve cups of shaved ice. To create a sense of community, on Monday nights, everyone joins in for game night, including Christian Science nurses and staff. We laugh our heads off. We play things like charades, Trivial Pursuit, costume bingo, and Jeopardy! I even created several Christian Science Jeopardy! Games. On a more individual basis, I'm always checking in with each resident. If they need something or have an idea that they'd like to pursue, I try to make it happen. For instance, I'll take residents to sit out on the Starbucks patio. We go to the duck pond and feed ducks. We go shopping, go to the library, to the nature center, museum, out to favorite restaurants, and I take them to all their appointments, as well as do plenty of residential home driving tours. There is a resident that likes to swim, so I take her to the tennis and swimming club across the street. She likes to swim, but I also have her doing all kinds of movement in the water. The first time I asked her to run in the pool, you should have seen her face. She lit up, acknowledging that she was doing something that she hadn't done in a long time. It was very inspiring. I really listen for divine love's guidance and tailor the activities to the residents that are here. I try to be open to change, spontaneity, and meeting every human need.
Thank you to Joan for the readings and to Al, Kate, and Whitney for those wonderful reports. You know, listening to Joan's reading on angels, I found myself thinking about the many opportunities we've had this year at Olive Glen to really hone our listening skills, to learn how to be more receptive to those angel messages that come to each one of us each moment from our Father, Mother, God. I love the angel idea and the way it's expressed in hymn 9 from our Christian Science hymnal. He knows the angels that you need and sends them to your side to comfort, guard, and guide. Comforted, guarded, guided. That's actually the best way to describe this past year at Olive Glen. We've felt the loving touch of the Christ as we've embraced in our prayers those right here and those all around the world who need to feel that Christly touch and hear God's angel messages. We've felt comforted and guarded as we've taken the necessary steps to comply with all government health mandates with a true sense of peace and calm and safety. And guided, led along each step of the way as we've actively moved forward in many areas, including welcoming new Christian Science nursing staff, reinstating a visiting Christian Science nurse service that serves the greater Sacramento area and beyond, and continuing to move ahead in assessing a necessary rebuild of our assisted living building. This rebuild project is still an idea that's just beginning to take shape. Our strategic planning committee and the Olive Glen board continue to listen for that gentle guidance and leading from Divine Mind. We'll be sharing more with you about this project in our upcoming newsletter that'll be out before the end of this year. We've also felt so full of gratitude for each of our supporters whose loving and generous commitments enable Olive Glen to continue to provide a healing atmosphere for those relying on God to meet their needs. A huge thank you to each individual donor, volunteer, philanthropic partner, and to the National Fund for Christian Science Nursing. We feel so very blessed to be in partnership with each one. And a big thank you as well to all Olive Glen staff for their loving support and dedication. We've certainly been touched by God's angels in so many tangible ways this year. And speaking of angels, I'd like to introduce our guest speaker, Jan Holden, Christian Science practitioner from Redwood Shores, California. Jan grew up in Canada in a family of 5 generations of class-taught Christian Scientists. She began her ministry of Christian Science nursing at Sharon House in Toronto between semesters at Principia College. She served as a Christian Science nurse for 22 years in many capacities, including Christian Science nursing instructor and acting director of Christian Science nurses training at Ardenwood. In 1999, Jan went into the full-time practice of Christian Science. In addition to her public practice, she's actively served the Christian Science movement in many capacities, and since 2002 has addressed Christian Science associations in 4 different countries. The title of Jan's talk today is Go Through the Gates. It's an inspiring message, one that affirms our inseparable relationship to God and the reality of experiencing the kingdom of heaven right here and now.
Hello, dear fellow lovers of Olive Glen. I'm so happy and grateful to have the privilege of speaking with you today. And a big thanks to Carrie, the board, the staff, and many others at Olive Glen for coordinating this talk and the entire annual meeting. As many of you know, I used to live in Sacramento, and I love having the opportunity to reconnect. Olive Glen is a very special place, meeting the needs of the Christian Science community here. It thrives under the love and care of our Christian Science nurses and staff, local church members, extended families, and those who love Olive Glen's vision. Olive Glen's vision statement is to inspire all who enter the atmosphere of Olive Glen with the evidence and gratitude of safely relying on God to meet all human needs. This makes me think of the first lines of hymn 144. In atmosphere of love divine, we live and move and breathe. It is this atmosphere of divine love that we bear witness to in this vision, day by day, that's found in all the details of love and care for everyone involved with Olive Glen. So a big thanks to all. Our topic for today is go through the gates. When I asked God what he wanted the topic to be, his response was, go through. I then remembered how many times I've heard people say anxious or fearful things like, we're sure going through some tough times. Everything is so challenging. I don't know how we're going to get through it all. Yes, it's difficult, but we'll get through it with each other's help. This has been going on for so long, it seems like the new norm, but I'm not willing to go there yet. So the ideas in this talk will help us allay fear and anxiety, feel divine love's ever-presence and power more certainly and consistently, and go through whatever we're experiencing with more calm, strength, persistence, and courage. Our way shower, Christ Jesus, was without fear because he knew so clearly that God was the only power and presence, and that God was all good. So Jesus was always able to allay fear. Sometimes it was a simple gesture of touching someone to express compassion and to encourage them. Often it was being not afraid or fear not. This was not just a comforting thing to say, it was a command. And he knew that we, as fellow children of our divine Father, Mother, God, are obedient to God's commands. There is no fear in God, so there can be no fear in you, in us, as God's expression. Since God, good, fills all space, there is no fear. It could even be the 11th commandment, do not fear. Even the phrase, don't be afraid, still can leave you feeling that Although you may not be afraid at the moment, something could come along and make you afraid again. But we can always turn our thought to God and reason spiritually, knowing that God's infinite spiritual goodness and his all power are ever present. There is no room or reason to fear. We can be certain of God's infinite, all good presence. We can be calm and confident in the all power of good God. We can be sure that divine love will always meet our needs, whatever they may be. We are never alone because God is always with us. This brings us peace. Let's explore the verses from the King James Bible that include this phrase, go through, which is from Isaiah 62. Go through the gates. Prepare ye the way of the people. Cast up the highway. Gather out the stones. Lift up a standard for the people. And they shall call them the holy people, the redeemed of the Lord. And thou shalt be called sought out, a city not forsaken. The implication of the command to go through the gates is that if you are on the inside, you need to go out and help others by removing whatever obstacles would prevent them from coming inside. However, if you are on the outside of the gates, the command is to go in. But into where? Into the kingdom of heaven, the city that lies foursquare, the New Jerusalem, as described in Revelation 21, all of which imply the eternal presence of harmony and goodness. Mary Baker Eddy, the founder of Christian Science, gives us the spiritual definitions of Kingdom of Heaven and New Jerusalem in the glossary of Science and Health with Key to the Scriptures. The definition of Kingdom of Heaven: the reign of harmony in divine science, the realm of unerring, eternal, and omnipotent mind, the atmosphere of spirit where soul is supreme. And the definition of New Jerusalem: divine science, the spiritual facts and harmony of the universe, the kingdom of heaven, or reign of harmony. So, since the kingdom of heaven, or harmony, is on the inside, that is why we are commanded to go through those gates. But what is on the outside of the gates? Isn't it what would be considered the wilderness? Going back to the glossary in Science and Health, the spiritual definition of wilderness is helpful. Wilderness: loneliness, doubt, darkness, spontaneity of thought and idea, the vestibule in which a material sense of things disappears and spiritual sense unfolds the great facts of existence. Loneliness, doubt, darkness. Sounds a bit like the last couple of years, doesn't it? And here are some spiritual antonyms for each of those three words. Loneliness, the opposite is companioned, embraced, satisfied. And for doubt, the antonyms are certainty, trust, confidence, unwavering, sure, fearless, faithful. And the opposites to darkness are light, hopeful, moral, radiant, clear, cheerful, fresh, fruitful. If we've been feeling susceptible to loneliness, doubt, and darkness, we can change that by a change in thought and turning to God for help. As we turn away from loneliness, doubt, darkness, or feeling forsaken to God, divine love, we can expect to feel companioned and embraced, sure and certain of good, and hopeful, cheerful, and fruitful. For example, the Israelites wandered in the wilderness for 40 years. However, God was right with them each day and each night, leading them from the front, protecting them from behind, feeding them, providing them with fresh water, uplifting them when they were discouraged, uniting them, healing them, and guiding them with fresh ways of living more in accord with his commands. The goal wasn't to just leave Egypt and live in the wilderness, but to go through the wilderness with God's help until they came to the promised land. And not just to stay on the outside of the promised land, but to go in and live in the land that was promised to them by God. And what is the promised land but the kingdom of heaven that has been promised to all of God's creation and is his very presence? Our goal is not just to live a good, but limited, matter-based life like the Israelites had in Egypt, or even to live a freer but meager, matter-based life like the Israelites had in the wilderness, where they had demonstrations and healings through glimpses of truth, God. Just like the Israelites, we need to arrive at and live every day in the land that has been promised to each of us, the kingdom of heaven, which is within each and every one of us, here and now and always. And this was the very gospel or good news that Jesus preached and that Mrs. Eddy wrote about. Going back to the definition of wilderness in the glossary, it included the word vestibule. The definition of the word vestibule is the porch or entrance into a house, or a large open space before the door, but covered. So the vestibule could be a protected area in front of the gates mentioned by Isaiah. I love the fact that it's a protected area. We're protected while we exchange a material sense of things for a spiritual sense. And while divine love unfolds his perfect goodness, safety, health, and harmony for us, just as he did for the Israelites. There were many times when the Israelites felt stuck in the wilderness. I'm sure there are many times when each of us feels stuck in situations or conditions. I encourage you to persist and keep persisting until you get unstuck. Persistence is an undervalued but important Christian quality that is very strengthening. Here are 3 sentences in Science and Health that include variations of the word persist. Science shows that material, conflicting, mortal opinions and beliefs emit the effects of error at all times. But this atmosphere of mortal mind cannot be destructive to morals and health when it is opposed promptly and persistently by Christian Science. That was on page 273. And then on page 400, by lifting thought above error or disease and contending persistently for truth, you destroy error. And on page 462, there is nothing difficult nor toilsome in this task when the way is pointed out, but self-denial, sincerity, Christianity, and persistence alone win the prize, as they usually do in every department of life. And in this sentence on page 514, Mrs. Eddy uses the word perseverance. In the figurative transmission from the divine thought to the human, diligence, promptness, and perseverance are likened to the cattle upon 1,000 hills. They carry the baggage of stern resolve and keep pace with highest purpose. Persistence or perseverance implies a constancy or even an increasingly stronger state of thought that is finally able to overcome and go through the gates. Having a pendulum state of thought that goes back and forth between problems and solutions, discouragement and hope, one step forward and one step backward, is never a good state of thought to have. This is addressed in Science and Health on page 23. Faith, if it be mere belief, is as a pendulum swinging between nothing and something, having no fixity. Faith, advanced to spiritual understanding, is the evidence gained from spirit, which rebukes sin of every kind and establishes the claims of God. How do we stay fixed in thought on the good, like Paul tells us to do in his letters? You remember when he lists several qualities of thought, such as truth, honesty, justice, purity, loveliness, and then tells us to think on these things. When we more actively govern our thought with the truth of God's ever-present goodness, this then governs our bodies and experience with increased harmony. We don't want to allow ourselves to be passive in governing and guarding our thought. For every error, there needs to be an answer of spiritual truth. Being a very diligent security guard at the door of our own thought, we need to detect which thoughts are error, false beliefs, or have their origin in the claim of a mind separate from God, the one mind. Then we firmly reject them. Then we turn to mind God for his thoughts of truth, life, and love, and hold to them. Sometimes, like the Israelites in the wilderness, it feels like we're stuck. A certain phrase, not from God, gets stuck in our thought and repeats itself. We don't recognize that we're allowing that to happen, and it just continues. Never let that happen beyond a couple of times. Detect it happening and have an answer of spiritual truth, which could be something you memorized in Sunday school, a hymn, a Bible verse, or something in Mrs. Eddy's writings. Ask Mind God for ideas. An example of this was a dear friend who called me for prayerful help one time. She'd had an injury that had made a lot of progress in healing, but it wasn't complete. She felt stuck. She felt she'd been diligent in working spiritually and prayerfully, but was not having any further progress. And there wasn't a complete healing of the injury. She said she had initially made some good progress, but that had stopped. As you can tell from her description, there was a lot of focus on not making progress. When she finished speaking, I said, "Why don't we give you a Christian Science treatment for lack of progress?" There was a long silence, and she said, "Well, it can't be that simple." I said, "Well, let's just try it, shall we? We need to reverse this false claim of no progress. God has a law that governs his entire creation at all times and under all circumstances, that progress is continually unfolding and is ever present. Progress is the law of God. So let's know and understand that this law is operating here and now and always. A couple of days later, she called back and joyfully said, "Guess what? I'm making progress." We had a good laugh. She continued to make good, strong progress. Another phrase I've heard that isn't helpful is, "There is no light at the end of the tunnel." So let's take a look at this phrase that is simply a temptation of discouragement and turn it around with an answer of truth. So you're in a tunnel. I've driven or been on a train in some really amazing tunnels in Colorado, underwater between Detroit, Michigan and Windsor, Ontario, and between England and France, as well as in Switzerland, Italy, and Norway. I think tunnels are incredible feats of engineering. They're very useful and help us get more easily from one place to another. There is always a light at the end of every tunnel because there is always an opening or exit to the tunnel. You can also think of the tunnel to be like a vestibule, knowing that it too is a protected place right in front of the gates that invite you into the light of divine life, the kingdom of heaven. If there appears to be no light, it may be because it's an extra long tunnel with twists and turns, and you just need to persist and go further and trust, knowing that there is an end to the tunnel. If there is no light, it may be because you're not facing the end of the tunnel, but facing the sides of the tunnel. That can be when we get stuck in our thinking, letting fearful thoughts be like a record that repeats itself over and over. Refuse to let that happen. Stop the repetition with something that's helpful, like the 23rd Psalm, the 91st Psalm, the Lord's Prayer, or your favorite hymns. As soon as you begin to turn away from the mesmerism to what is spiritually uplifting you, you instantly are moving towards the light at the end of the tunnel. As you fill your thought more strongly with the light of truth, it's like you're running to the end of the tunnel. When you feel divine love's presence and power, you are out of the tunnel and into the light. An example of the command to go through the gates is an experience I had when I was in Europe. I was having a lovely dinner with the committee members for a group of people I was to give a talk to the next day. There had been many obstacles overcome in the preceding weeks, and I felt so grateful to finally arrive and enjoy the beautiful setting and dear people. During the fish course of the meal, I had forgotten that in Europe, all the bones are not removed, as is customary in the US. So as I was eating a mouthful of delicious fish, I was concentrating more on the conversation in another language, and I wasn't paying much attention to what I was doing. Moments later, I realized a large fish bone was stuck halfway down my throat. Due to the obstacles overcome and the preparation for my talk, I had been feeling very close to God because of turning to Him over and over for guidance, solutions, and healing, which I had received in each situation. It was very natural for me at that moment to quickly turn my thought to Him and seek guidance on how to approach this situation. Instantly, the very strong command came into my thought: do not fear. I recognized that if I disobeyed, my throat could swell up with the fear and lodge the fishbone, making a solution more difficult. I could detect the temptation to fear in what seemed like a very distant thought that had nothing to do with me. However, with the command also came the ability and willingness to be obedient. I knew that Mind God was my protection. I knew there was no fear in the presence of Mind God that was being my mind right then, keeping me safe. As I pondered these wonderful unfoldments, I felt so grateful for God's loving care for me during the past weeks, and that this moment was included in that same care. I suddenly felt flooded with God's love for me and just basked in it. As my thought gradually emerged from this God encounter, I remembered the situation with the fishbone and realized that the fishbone was not there in my throat. I hadn't swallowed, so the fishbone hadn't gone down my throat. I hadn't brought it up into my mouth, and so it wasn't there either. It was just gone. I sat there quietly rejoicing. Then I began to eat again and listen to the conversation. Within moments, the exact same thing occurred again. I realized a large fishbone was again stuck halfway down my throat. I again turned my thought to God, and instantly came the very strong command again: do not fear. There was nothing in me that could be disobedient to this command. I felt my safety and oneness with God. My gratitude for God's previous care and the flood of love for me from Him washed away the claim that there had ever been any obstacles, leaving only the ongoing presence of harmony. As my thought returned to the situation at hand, I once again realized the second fishbone ceased to exist in my throat. I hadn't swallowed it, and it hadn't come up into my mouth. It just wasn't there. Then I realized that love, divine love, had dissolved it. No one was aware of what I had experienced. That was the end of the situation, and it didn't happen again. The blessings didn't end there as I continued to ponder this holy moment. The group that attended the talk the next day expressed much gratitude for the inspiration and healings resulting from the talk. Afterwards, I realized another benefit of the experience was that it was made so clear that the fear was not in me, was not in my thinking, and that I was not the source of the fear. It was so apparent that the fear was not a part of divine love, and so it couldn't be a part of me. I also realized that I had refused to let anything separate me from God, whom I completely trusted to figure out a solution to this difficulty. I didn't try to figure out how to get the fishbone out by myself. It never even crossed my thought to do so, or have an opinion on the best methods of removal. Instead, I turned wholeheartedly to mind God for the solution. I loved God's solution. It just wasn't there. As the result of this experience, I can more clearly see fear for what it is: nothing. I went through the gates, and through God's love glimpsed the ever-present harmony of divine life. Whether we go through an experience or His love dissolves it, God is ever-present good and is always right with us, and nothing can ever separate us from Him. Because spiritually we are always with God and one with Him, therefore we can feel God's peace and love caring for us. Be at peace. Again, Paul tells us what to think about. Things that are true, not necessarily true humanly, because that seems to vary so much. But what is true spiritually? How mind God is seeing this situation or person, and to think about what is honest and just. And God's justice is never without the tenderness of mercy. Think about what is pure, lovely, and of good report. Think about what is virtuous and what is worthy of praise. That's a lot of good stuff to be thinking about. So much so that you don't have the time to fill your thought with reading on your phone or watching TV about negative stuff. So let's not fill our thoughts with what isn't of good report. Be willing to challenge any tendency to be anxious or fearful about anything. Fear has no power. It can seem like a bully, but if you challenge it, it will back down and disappear. Error is a coward before truth. Truth is always the victor. Both of those quotes from Science and Health. If there's a habit of allowing anxiety or worry to rule thought, then just as we got into a habit, we can also get out of a habit with steadfast persisting for thinking about things of a good report. Paul's next verse tells us that as a result of thinking all those good things, that the God of peace shall be with you. So the direct result of keeping thought focused on good is to feel more peaceful. If we're not feeling peaceful, the reason can be that we're not focusing thought on good. We can change that easily by turning away from evil to good, away from matter to spirit, from error to truth, from mortal mind to the divine mind. Psalms 46 says, "Be still and know that I am God." And from Science and Health, let neither fear nor doubt overshadow your clear sense and calm trust that the recognition of life harmonious as life eternally is can destroy any painful sense of or belief in that which life is not. We can even work this statement into a statement of truth for ourselves. For example, I know that neither fear nor doubt can overshadow my clear sense and calm trust that I do understand that my life is all harmonious because God is my life, and life God is all good, all love, all health and harmony. This truth about God and about me does destroy any painful sense or any false belief in sickness, disease, virus, or anything else of which divine life is not. Divine life is harmonious. We can realize that the gates may be closed, but they're never locked. All we have to do is go through the gates. And we do that when we turn to mind God and ask for help. And the answers, the health, harmony, protection, and safety will always come. Let me give you another example. In 2002, there were several child abductions in California. I had been praying about the situation, and one night, out of the blue, I felt impelled to turn on the TV. As I did, scrolling across the bottom was a news alert telling of an 8-year-old girl who had been kidnapped off her bicycle by a man in front of her house in West Sacramento. As soon as all of the information was given, I immediately turned off the TV and began to pray vehemently for the child's safety and the man's purity. I asked God how to pray, and his response was unusual, but I was obedient to it. The idea came very clearly to address the girl's thought directly, as if she was in the room with me right then. So I reassured her, comforted her, and told her of the qualities she innately expressed as God's beloved daughter: purity, goodness, intelligence, alertness, fearlessness, courage, and strength. I told her that God would lead her to safety and that she needed to be ready to be obedient and leave the car as soon as the man told her to, and to go to the nearest house, identify herself, and ask for help. Then it came to me to address the man's thought in a similar way. I told him of God's loving ever-presence, that his Father, Mother, God was the only mind and was his mind, and that there was no other mind to influence or control him, confuse or harm him, tempt him, make him unhappy, or feel unloved. It then came to me to use the rule for motives and acts from our church manual, which is read in church once a month as a prayer treatment. Neither animosity nor mere personal attachment can impel your motives or acts. In science, divine love alone is governing you. You reflect only the sweet amenities of divine love. You are able to firmly rebuke error in yourself and others. You are able to express true brotherliness to yourself, to this child, and to her family. You are able to forgive yourself and anyone else, just as God forgives you. You can pray to be delivered from all evil, including self-justification, negativity, judging others that they're not doing what they should, condemning yourself, accepting unwise counseling, or being influenced by fear, anger, envy, hatred, or revenge. I told him he already had everything he needed because the presence of divine principle love was right with him, abundantly providing him with overflowing goodness and love. That God had ordained him to be forever in right relationship with God and with all of God's creation, and that he was completely peaceful and satisfied with Father, Mother God's love, harmony, and goodness. Then I told him he must, at the very next opportunity, pull over and let the girl go without any harm. And then I thanked him for his responsiveness and obedience. I closed by affirming that this was the spiritual truth of their being, and there was nothing that could reverse or delay this truth and its manifestation. About an hour and a half later, I was impelled to turn on the TV again, and there was another news alert scrolling across the screen and a picture of the girl. She had just been released by the man, unharmed, by the side of the freeway. She had made her way to a nearby house, identified herself, and asked for help in getting home again. She was completely safe and well. The man was never found. The mesmerism of this mental trend was broken, and I didn't hear of any more abductions for some time. I felt God called me to answer these calls for help from both the man and the girl. God guided me and them every step of the way. As I prayed, I entered the gates into the kingdom of heaven, the presence of divine love, and took them with me. I refuted each claim that was facing each of them until I could see them entirely embraced and strengthened by divine love. I think the 23rd Psalm is a perfect prayer and reiteration of what happened. The Lord is my shepherd. I shall not want. He makes me to lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside the still waters. He restores my soul. He leads me in the paths of righteousness for his name's sake. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. You anoint my head with oil. My cup runs over. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. In verse 4, yes, even though it seems as if I am walking in this valley of death, it's the valley of the shadow of death. And because it's just a shadow, I can't feel it or experience it. And therefore, I will fear no evil. Why can I not fear evil? Because our divine Father, Mother love is always and forever, eternally and infinitely with me, and I with him. And this is true for all of us. Divine love's protection and guidance are providing for us and comforting us. Here's one more helpful definition from the glossary in Science and Health. The definition of the word valley: depression, meekness, darkness. Though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil. Psalms 23:4. Though the way is dark in mortal sense, divine life and love illumine it. Destroy the unrest of mortal thought, the fear of death, and the supposed reality of error. Christian Science, contradicting sense, maketh the valley to bud and blossom as the rose. End quote. Just think, in this valley, you have a shadow. But remember, where there's a shadow, there must be light. And just like in your own home, if you have a shadow, you turn on a bright light, and then the shadow disappears. So if you have a shadow in your thought or experience, turn to God, who is our divine light of life, truth, and love. And that shadow will dissipate just like it does after the sunrise every day. So right where this valley of the shadows of depression, darkness, problems, and lack of progress seems to be, is the ever presence of divine life and love, leading us out of the wilderness, through the gates, and into the kingdom of heaven. As we are taught in Christian Science, we can and must contradict and resist error of every kind. And this good report of spiritual reality causes our lives to bud and blossom, just as the beautiful roses at Olive Glen bloom and bloom year after year in all their fullness. Go through the valley of fear, darkness, and limitation, the vestibule, and walk through the gates right into the garden of divine soul, spirit, the kingdom of heaven, the city of divine love, knowing you are the beloved child of our Father, Mother, love, all harmonious. Thank you all for being such good listeners.
Thank you, Jan, for that wonderful, healing, and inspiring talk. Let's close with reading one of our leaders' poems together. The poem is Christ, My Refuge by Mary Baker Eddy. Please join me as I read. O'er waiting harp strings of the mind, there sweeps a strain, low, sad and sweet, whose measures bind the power of pain, and wake a white-winged angel throng of thoughts, illumed by faith and breathed in raptured song with love perfumed. Then his unveiled sweet mercies show life's burdens light. I kiss the cross and wake to know a world more bright. And o'er earth's troubled, angry sea, I see Christ walk and come to me and tenderly, divinely talk. Thus truth engrounds me on the rock, upon life's shore, 'gainst which the winds and waves can shock, oh, nevermore. From tired joy and grief afar, and nearer thee, Father, where thine own children are, I love to be. My prayer, some daily good to do, to thine, for thee, an offering pure of love, whereto God leadeth me. Well, that's a perfect conclusion for this inspiring day. Thank you all for joining us. You're so loved.